This is BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Our top stories. At least 5 are dead, including 2 children and their great-grandmother, as wildfires sweep across Northern California.
Swept into the city of Redding, jumping across the Sacramento River and leaving very severe destruction behind it.
At least 14 dead and more than 100 aftershocks after a powerful earthquake hits the Indonesian island of Lombok. A Palestinian teenager whose video of her assaulting an Israeli soldier went viral has been released from jail. She's now met the Palestinian president. And we hear from Great Britain's first disabled air display team as they get ready for takeoff. Hello and welcome to BBC World News. Wildfires fanned by strong winds have killed at least 5 people in Northern California and have forced nearly 40,000 to flee their homes. Among those killed were 2 young children and their great-grandmother. The blaze has destroyed at least 500 buildings in and near the city of Redding. Well, the BBC's James Cook is there.
Well, this fire continues to burn. It swept into the city of Redding, jumping across the Sacramento River and leaving very severe destruction behind it, not just in that city, but in other communities along the way, including Shasta, an old gold mining town where some properties were destroyed. It's been tragedy too. We know that 2 young children and their great-grandmother were among the people who died. 2 firefighters also were killed. One of those was a bulldozer operator who was 81 years old. And now the firefighters' attention is out here. We're further west and south from Redding now. The fire is moving in this direction. It is a very, very large blaze still, and it is one of perhaps 7 or so major fires now burning here in California, and some 90 that are burning across the western United States, and in fact as far across as Colorado and New Mexico. There have been fires too in Canada, perhaps 40 major fires in Canada, and way up in Alaska. But perhaps Oregon actually has been hardest hit. It has the highest number of significant blazes at the moment. What's extraordinary about this is how unextraordinary this is becoming. Year after year now in the United States and further afield in North America, we are seeing significant large blazes. And scientists say there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, human activity building out into the wildlands, a century of attempting to suppress those fires, allowing fuels to build up, allowing trees to grow more densely. And so when there is a fire, it's more devastating. But also natural weather patterns. There's been drought in California, parts of California for years. And, of course, climate change, which many scientists say has had an effect.
James Cook for us there. Next, it was a video that went viral and a punishment that was widely condemned when footage emerged of Palestinian teenager Ahed Tamimi slapping and kicking an Israeli soldier in the occupied West Bank. She was later imprisoned. She was 16 at the time. Well, a short while ago, she was welcomed back to the West Bank by a crowd of family and well-wishers. And Tom Bateman reports.
Ahed Tamimi was reunited with her family after nearly 8 months in Israeli jails. She was released, along with her mother Nariman, after a case which drew fresh attention to Israel's military occupation of the West Bank, now into its 52nd year.
I want to thank everyone who stood with me while I was in prison, especially the people who have campaigned for me, and I want to thank the journalists. I want to say to the campaigns who work for me to continue to work for all the other prisoners who are still in prison, especially the children.
Aged 16, in a video that was live streamed on Facebook by her family, she slapped and kicked an Israeli soldier outside her home. She demanded that troops get out. She was said to have been angry, having just learned that her teenage cousin was seriously wounded in clashes with Israeli soldiers. Her home village of Nabi Saleh is a scene of regular Palestinian protests. There was unrest at the time after the US decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. In March, she was tried in an Israeli military court, where she agreed to a guilty plea to assault and incitement, while other charges were dropped. The case drew worldwide attention. Human rights groups criticised Israel's system of military trial for Palestinian children. Many Israelis, though, saw restraint in their soldiers' actions. They accused the Tamimi family, who are frequent activists, of exploiting their daughter by live streaming her actions. They say the more serious point was that she called for large demonstrations, and she said President Trump must bear responsibility for any Palestinian violence or attacks. But to Palestinians, Ahed Tamimi has become a symbol of resistance against occupation. A 16-year-old girl who defended her home against soldiers, they say. Her actions have sparked intense debate. She says she has paid a heavy price. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, Nida Ibrahim from BBC Arabic is in front of Ms. Tamimi's house, where she held a press conference just a short time ago. So tell us, what more did she have to say?
She said a lot about her experience in prison. She said despite it being a difficult experience, she said despite missing the moon, missing seeing her friends and missing so many things that many people consider trivial, she said the experience has taught her a lot. It taught her to be more patient. She said it taught her to appreciate everything and every single act in life. She mentioned that she was afraid that she would not be able to finish her high school exams. However, she was able to study and file for those exams while she was in prison. She mentioned that after she takes her grades, she's hoping to study law in college and continue fighting the Israeli occupation. Now, the scene in her house, as you can see behind me, after she finished the press conference, is jubilant. Many Palestinians have come to say hello to Ahed and her mother and others to show solidarity and support for the young girl that has been gaining a lot of attention here.
Yeah, and some critics, some on the Israeli side, saying actually this is a family well used to activism and gaining publicity, and this is yet another example of that.
This is what we spoke to Ahed's father about before that. We asked him, what do you think about these accusations that you are using your daughter for publicity? He said, I am not in a position of defense. He refused to comment on these comments. And he said that even if Palestinians are trying to spread the word out about what's happening to them, if it was in that case, so be it.
OK, and just quickly, for people watching this and coming to this for the first time, how unusual is it for someone so young, 16 at the time, to receive a punishment like this?
Actually, what was interesting is that Ahed said she thanked her lawyer who was able to reach a plea bargain. She said if it wasn't for her lawyer, she might have even gotten a harsher sentence. She is not the only Palestinian to be tried in military courts and definitely not the only child in Israeli prison. We are talking about 300 children who are actually in Israeli jail until now, and many of them have been in and out for several periods of time. But the issue of military trial is not new. The attention to this case through Ahed is what's new in this case.
OK, Nida Ibrahim, thank you. Now, there's been over 100 aftershocks following a powerful earthquake on the Indonesian island of Lombok. At least 14 people have been killed on the island, which is popular with tourists. Officials say hundreds have been injured and the number of casualties is expected to rise. Catherine de Roster reports.
Buildings and lives shaken to the core. This was the scene dozens woke up to in northern Lombok. The distress clear to hear. The jolt was felt 60 miles away on the holiday island of Bali. Many buildings have been damaged. It's thought at least 40 people are injured. Many are still being treated after being hit by falling debris. A Malaysian tourist who was on a hiking trip is reportedly among those killed. The epicenter of the earthquake struck 30 miles northeast of the city of Mataram in the north of the island. Indonesia is prone to earthquakes. It lies on what's called the Ring of Fire, the line of quakes and volcanic eruptions that circle virtually the entire Pacific Rim. The region is on constant alert for tremors that might trigger tsunamis. This time, no alert was issued. The country's disaster agency says the main focus now is evacuation and rescue. Catherine da Costa, BBC News.
Well, earlier, I spoke to BBC producer Vinayak Gaikwad, who was on one of the Gili Islands just off the coast of Lombok when the earthquake struck.
At 6:47 in the morning, when everyone we were sleeping, suddenly everything was, there were loud noises and the earth was shaking. So we went out of the room to just see what happened. First few seconds were very confusing because nobody understood what was really happening. But in a couple of seconds, we understood that this was the earthquake. The local guys, they were screaming they were asking us to come out of the room and come out in the open. We were also thinking that if the earthquake has happened, it might turn up into tsunami warning. But locals said that there is no tsunami warning. They had checked and we also checked on the internet. But when I first checked it, I checked it 2 hours later. The first earthquake had happened. That time, they had said, the local administrative officials had said that there is no tsunami warning as the earthquake had happened on the ground and not on the water.
Just Vinayak Gaikwad for us there. Right, let's get some of the other day's news now. Qatar's successful bid to host the Football World Cup in 2022 is alleged to have used an American-based PR firm to discredit and undermine rival bids from the US and Australia. The claims are made in Britain's Sunday Times newspaper. The organisers of the Qatar bid say they reject each and every allegation put forward by the Sunday Times. The Bar Association in Serbia says the killing of one of the country's most prominent lawyers is an attack on them all. Dragoslav Ognjanovic was shot dead on Saturday outside his apartment building in Belgrade. He defended some of Serbia's leading underworld figures. There have been a series of fatal shootings in Belgrade connected to organised crime. A big storm has hit Japan's main island of Honshu, bringing torrential rain and high winds. Local reports say 16 people have been injured and thousands of homes have lost power. Typhoon Jong-Dori has now been downgraded to a tropical storm. It comes less than a month after flooding killed more than 200 people, plus the deadly heatwave across the country. Cambodia's election commission says turnout on Sunday's general election was more than 80%, but human rights groups have called the vote neither free nor fair. The largest opposition party was forced to disband in November. The Prime Minister, Hun Sen, is expected to hold on to power after nearly 33 years in office. And staying with those Cambodian elections now, Phil Robertson, the Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch's Asia Division, told me he disagrees with the government that the voter turnout means it's a proud day for the country.
This is actually a very sad day for Cambodian democracy because you've had an election run without the main opposition party, the CNRP party, which won 44% of the vote in 2017. They were not on the ballot. People are intimidated to go vote. The independent media has been shut down. Much of the websites for various different radios and websites that have critical points of view have been blocked over the last 2 days. It's a human rights and democracy disaster here.
Well, given that the main opposition party was dissolved, there's been reports of intimidation. The media, as you say, shut down in large part. How have ordinary Cambodians been viewing this vote?
Well, with trepidation and fear mostly. Many people did not want to go to vote, but they were facing pressure from local officials who said, don't go to vote, and if we look at your finger and it doesn't have the India ink on it, we're not going to provide you with any services.
That was Phil Robertson in Phnom Penh. Well, stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come. Excitement for Geraint Thomas, who is set to win the Tour de France when he cycles down the Champs-Élysées.
The US space agency NASA has ordered an investigation after confirmation today that astronauts were cleared to fly while drunk.
The last foot patrol in South Armagh, once an everyday part of the soldiers' lot, drudgery and danger, now no more after almost 4 decades.
If one is on one's own in a private house, not doing any harm to anyone, I don't really see why all these people should wander in and say you're doing something wrong.
6 rare white lion cubs are on the prowl at Worcestershire Park, and already they've been met with a roar of approval from visitors.
They're lovely, yeah, really sweet. Yeah, they were cute.
This is BBC World News, the latest headlines. Wildfires fanned by strong winds have killed at least 5 people in Northern California and have forced nearly 40,000 to flee their homes. Among those killed were 2 young children and their great-grandmother. At least 14 have died after a powerful earthquake hit the Indonesian island of Lombok. There have been more than 100 aftershocks. Zimbabwe's former president Robert Mugabe has addressed the media on the eve of the country's first election since he was ousted from office. He said the people of Zimbabwe hadn't been free since that time. He also said he won't be voting for the man who succeeded him, Emmerson Mnangagwa.
I must say very clearly, I cannot vote for those who have tormented me. No, I can't. I'll make my choice among the other 22.
Well, our reporter Nomsa Masego is in Zimbabwean capital Harare. Nomsa, at times it was a very strange press conference to listen to. What were the kind of things he was saying?
Well, Mr. Mugabe sounded like he was a very bitter man. He sounded like he was hard done by and, quite frankly, not over what happened in November last year when he was ousted in a military coup and his predecessor Emmerson Mnangagwa having taken over. He described Zimbabweans as feeling very terribly threatened and also frightened, and he also urged Zimbabweans to go out and vote and said he needed them to go out and vote for a legitimate government, and also said that he would rather go and vote for the movement for democratic change which is now led by Nelson Chamisa, and going as far as saying that his predecessor Emmerson Mnangagwa is not trustworthy and Zimbabweans themselves should not trust him.
Yeah, amazing comments about his successor and then the endorsing essentially the opposition. How much influence do you think Robert Mugabe has still in the country?
Well, people were wanting to know and hear him out in terms of they just want to know what he's going to say. But in terms of influence, those around him are possibly going to be listening to him being told who to vote for. But in terms of the majority of this country, it remains to be seen how Zimbabweans themselves are going to vote. And Zimbabweans also are saying that, you know, this is a new dawn, this is a new change, and that they are looking forward to peace and stability, and that whoever takes over the government, sorts out the economy and also brings about jobs, particularly for young people.
OK, Nomsa, for the moment, thank you very much. And of course, that poll opens on Monday. OK, Hugh has all the sport for us.
Hello. It's a momentous day for Welsh cycling as Geraint Thomas is poised to become the first man from the country to win the Tour de France. He merely has to stay upright and not take in too much champagne as the race heads into Paris down the Champs-Élysées. It'll be the 6th success in 7 years for Britain and Team Sky after Sir Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome. And former pro rider turned commentator Rob Hales has told us it will be a life-changing moment for Thomas.
It's quite amazing, really, when you look back at Geraint's career over the Tour de France 11 years ago when he first came here, youngest rider in the Tour, and then he's progressed and progressed. Obviously, he's been away from the Tour on a couple of occasions, picking up a couple of Olympic gold medals on the track. And then the last 12 months, certainly, he is focused on this. And when you look at how he has ridden within the team, he is pretty much always ridden alongside somebody else. Chris Froome, obviously, the main rider who he has looked after to help gain the yellow jersey on 4 occasions. And finally, this year, he is focused on the sole objective of trying to get the yellow jersey himself. And he's come away with it. He's actually done it. It's really been emotional. He is an extremely popular winner amongst the crowd, amongst the public. but I think more importantly amongst his peers, amongst the riders in the peloton, and so that's an achievement in itself.
And now it's never really a friendly when Liverpool take on Manchester United. The rivals face one another in the pre-season tournament, the International Champions Cup. And it's Liverpool who have the bragging rights going into the new Premier League season after a thumping 4-1 win in front of over 100,000 fans in Michigan. Liverpool took the lead with a penalty, but United levelled with an absolute stunner. Andreas Pereira with the free kick. Worth having another look at it as well. A stunning piece of technique, giving the goalkeeper no chance. But after that, it was all Liverpool. Daniel Sturridge, then that penalty from Shea Ojo made it 3-1. And then the best of the lot, how about this from new signing Xherdan Shaqiri? And to compound things for Manchester United, news that they'll be without their Serbian midfielder Nemanja Matic for the start of the season due to injury. And now, after their dismal 2-0 defeat to Sri Lanka in the Test matches, South Africa's cricketers have the chance to make amends in the 5-match one-day series. And they've made a winning start in Dambulla. Kagiso Rabada made early inroads into Sri Lanka's batting after they decided to bat. Both Rabada and spinner Tabraiz Shamsi each took 4 wickets. Sri Lanka could only make 193 all out in less than 35 overs. The South Africans then knocked off the runs with 19 overs and 5 wickets to spare. JP Duminy top scoring with 53 not out. Matteo Berrettini has won his first ATP Tour title after beating Roberto Bautista Agut in the Swiss Open, the Italian playing in his first Tour final, but you wouldn't have known it. He won the opening set 11-9 in the tie-break. He then converted a break point in the 10th game of the second set to complete the victory. It's been quite a week for the 22-year-old. He didn't lose a single service game or concede a set. Lewis Hamilton started on pole at the Hungarian Grand Prix and is looking to extend his 17-point lead at the top of the drivers' standings in Formula One. Red Bull's Max Verstappen left the race early with engine problems. Hamilton pitted from the lead, which allowed his title rival Sebastian Vettel to go in front. But a poor pit stop from Ferrari in the last few minutes means that Vettel's chances have been reduced of victory, of course. He's now third behind Mercedes' Valtteri Bottas. His teammate Hamilton, though, remains in the lead. That is all the sport for now, but you can keep up to date with the goings-on from Hungary on the BBC Sport website. It's bbc.com/sport.
Thanks, Hugh. Great Britain's first disabled air display team is getting ready for takeoff. The 4-person squad, assembled in honour of the World War II flying ace Sir Douglas Bader, will take to the skies in September, and a film crew from our disability unit, BBC Ouch, went with them.
Formation, Roger, readability 5 is going to be runway 09 left.
Alan with Barry, Mike and Mark. We will be Great Britain's first disabled air display team. I want us to be a display team that people want to see because we're good, rather than, oh look what those disabled people are doing, bless. I want us to be good.
After 20 odd years of being paralysed, it's fair to say I was pretty fed up. Somebody turning around and saying, do you want to learn to fly? It was like the light came on again, you know?
How is it? Much better.
I've got the least experience of anybody here.
I'm very privileged to be in the team, but I'd also be quite relieved to be the one that sat on the ground doing the commentary for the first air display.
What attracts me is it's good fun to sit there and look out the window and see another aeroplane. You're using all the controls all the time. You're using the throttle, the ailerons, elevators and the rudder pedals, which obviously we both have difficulties with that. So you're constantly on the go.
If I'm honest, I'm uncomfortable flying close to another aircraft. You're taught see and avoid, and all of a sudden you're close enough that there's this huge aircraft that's there next to you, and they're saying, in a little bit closer, in a little bit closer. And really all I want to do is run away. But the thrill of doing this is just unbeatable. I think we both know what pain is. I was paralysed at 18 years old. I had a motorcycle accident, broke nearly every bone in my body apart from my arms and legs. Very lucky to survive, but it left me, confined to a wheelchair for the rest of my life.
What happened to me was the same, a motorbike. I got hit by a car and it almost amputated my leg there and then, and the surgeons did the rest of it that night. When I woke up the next morning and realised my leg had gone, I realised that my ambition to fly might have been gone because I didn't know that disabled people could fly. So I did a little bit of research. I found that disabled people could fly, and then I just made it a goal simply to get a licence. I wouldn't have thought in a million years I'd be able to go into formation flying, and who knows what's next.
It's not going to be a case of we are the Red Arrows with propellers and no legs. I still can't believe that we're doing this. Just learning to fly was a privilege. Learning to fly formation, that just doesn't happen. That's something else, let alone to disabled pilots. I think there's still a perception that disabled people just aren't capable of living full, independent lives. And I hope that sometimes by doing something like this, you know, we help straighten that record a little bit.
Well, that's just about it from me for this hour. Don't forget you can get in touch with me on Twitter. I'm @LVaughanJones and I am Lewis Vaughan-Jones, and you're watching BBC World News.